The first thing I saw was the notification banner on my phone, lighting up my nightstand at 2:14 a.m. Account alert. Withdrawal completed. I didn't even sit up at first. I remember thinking it was another one of those harmless system messages my credit union sent whenever interest posted or a statement closed. I almost rolled over and went back to sleep. Then my brain caught up. Withdrawal. I grabbed my phone, thumb shaking just enough that I missed my passcode once. When the app finally opened, the number on the screen didn't make sense. I stared at it the way you stare at a typo in a contract, assuming your eyes were wrong. Balance, $0. 2 days earlier, that account held $286,940. Money I had spent 11 years building, protecting, and not touching. Money that had one job only: keep me safe. I sat up so fast I felt dizzy. I'm Natalie Brooks. I was 34 years old when my family decided my life savings belonged to them. At the time, I was living in a rented townhouse outside Portland, Oregon, working as an operations director for a logistics company near the river. It wasn't glamorous work, but it was stable, and stability had been my religion since my early 20s. I didn't come from wealth. I came from expectations. My parents, Harold and June Brooks, raised us on one central belief: loyalty mattered more than comfort. Family mattered more than fairness. And obedience, especially from daughters, was considered a virtue. My younger sister, Claire, was proof of that hierarchy. She was 3 years younger than me, louder, needier, and somehow always in crisis. Claire had potential, my mother liked to say. She just needed support, guidance, help. I was the opposite. The capable one. The one who didn't need much. The one who could wait. By the time I was 18, that role was cemented. Scholarships covered most of my college. I worked 2 jobs to cover the rest. When I opened my first checking account at 17, my father insisted his name be added. Just for protection, he said, smiling across the desk at the bank. In case anything ever happens. Nothing ever happened until it did. At 2:19 a.m., I refreshed the app again. Same number, 0. I clicked into transaction history, my heart pounding hard enough to hurt. There it was, a single transfer, entire balance, sent to an external account I didn't recognize. Authorized by co-owner Harold Brooks, my father. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I sat there in the dark, staring at the screen, feeling something quiet and heavy settle in my chest. Not panic. Recognition. Because this wasn't sudden. It was the end of something that had been building for years. The next morning, I went to work like nothing had happened. Showered, dressed, answered emails, sat through a budget meeting where I nodded at numbers that suddenly felt ironic. At 9:47 a.m., I excused myself and walked outside to call the bank. The woman on the line spoke in the calm, practiced tone of someone who didn't know she was dismantling a life. Yes, Miss Brooks. I can confirm the transfer was completed yesterday afternoon. As your father is a joint account holder, the transaction was authorized. I didn't approve it, I said. I understand. However, under joint ownership. Did he need my signature? There was a pause. Typing. Yes, there is an electronic authorization on file. That's not possible, I said quietly. I didn't sign anything. Another pause. Longer this time. I can send you the documentation. Please do. When the email arrived, I opened it standing on the sidewalk outside my office, rain misting my hair. My name was there, typed neatly beneath a digital signature, timestamped at 3:02 a.m. I was asleep at 3:02 a.m. I called my father immediately. He answered on the first ring. So, he said, not bothering with hello. You saw. Where is my money? I asked. There was a sigh on the other end. The familiar one. The one that meant I was about to be reminded of my place. Claire needed it, Natalie. You know she's getting married. Your mother and I couldn't let her start her life embarrassed. My sister's wedding. That was the reason. I leaned against the brick wall and closed my eyes. That money wasn't for a party, I said. It was my house fund. You knew that. You're single, he replied, as if that settled everything. You have time. Claire doesn't. You forged my signature. Silence. Then a small laugh, dismissive, almost amused. Don't be dramatic. It's family money. Family money. I ended the call without another word. That afternoon, my mother left me a voicemail. Her voice was strained but controlled, the way it always was when she wanted something. "We didn't mean to upset you," she said. "But this wedding is important. People will be watching. And you know Claire has always been sensitive. Try to understand." I deleted the message. By the time I drove home that night, I already knew what I was going to do. I didn't argue. I didn't threaten. I didn't explain. I opened my laptop, pulled up my financial records, and started a folder. Because if my family thought this was about money, they were wrong. It was about permission, and I was done giving it. I didn't confront anyone that night. That surprised even me. Old Natalie would have drafted a careful email, full of measured language and gentle questions. Old Natalie would have tried to fix it quietly, preserve the illusion that we were still a functional family having a temporary misunderstanding. Instead, I made tea, sat at my kitchen table, and opened a new document titled Timeline. I listed facts, dates, amounts. No emotions, no commentary. The first line read, March 12th, 2012. Account opened. Joint owner added, Harold Brooks. I kept going. By midnight, the document was 6 pages long. Patterns emerged when I looked at the numbers instead of the stories attached to them. Small withdrawals over the years I had dismissed as bank errors or fees. A $4,000 transfer I didn't remember authorizing right after Claire dropped out of her first graduate program. Another $6,500 the month my parents replaced their kitchen appliances. Always explained away after the fact. Always presented as temporary. Always framed as family helping family. I slept deeply that night. Not peacefully, but decisively. The next morning, I didn't go to work. I called my boss and told her I needed a personal day. She didn't ask questions. She never did. At 9:03 a.m., I walked into the downtown branch of Cascadia Credit Union with a folder under my arm and my spine straight. The banker assigned to me was a man in his late 40s named Daniel Frost. He had kind eyes and the cautious posture of someone who'd seen situations go sideways more times than he could count. "I need to report a fraudulent transaction," I said. He didn't interrupt. He listened while I explained. When I mentioned the electronic signature, his expression changed. Not shocked, focused. "Let's take a look," he said. I handed him my phone, the email pulled up and ready. He studied it carefully, then turned his screen toward me. "Miss Brooks," he said slowly, "this authorization didn't originate from any device previously associated with your profile." I nodded. "I know. The IP address traces back to a residential connection in Salem, my parents' town. Do you want to formally dispute this transaction?" he asked. "Yes." "And file an identity theft report?" "Yes." That was the moment. The real one. Not the zero balance, not my father's voice on the phone. This. Daniel slid a form across the desk. "Once this is filed," he said, "we can't undo it. There will be an investigation, possibly law enforcement involvement." I picked up the pen without hesitation. "I understand." When I walked out of the bank an hour later, my hands were steady. I felt lighter, which scared me more than panic ever could have. At noon, Claire texted me, "Why are you ignoring Mom?" I didn't respond. An hour later, another message. "Dad says you're being dramatic. This is my wedding, Natalie. I thought you'd be happy for me." I stared at the screen for a long time before typing, "You stole from me." 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Dad said it was fine. That was Claire in a sentence. Responsibility outsourced. Consent assumed. Damage minimized. I put my phone face down and went back to my document. By evening, my parents escalated. My mother showed up at my townhouse without warning. I watched her car pull into my driveway through the window, her posture already rigid with offense. She knocked once, sharply, like she was announcing herself to a servant. I didn't open the door. She knocked again, louder. "Natalie, I know you're home." I waited until the 3rd knock before opening it. She walked past me without asking, her eyes scanning my living room like she was inspecting a hotel room that hadn't been cleaned properly. "This is ridiculous," she said. "You've made your point." "I haven't," I replied. She turned, surprised. "Excuse me?" "I haven't made my point yet." Her lips pressed together. That familiar look. Disapproval disguised as concern. "Your father explained everything," she said. Claire needed help. The wedding costs got out of control. Deposits were due. What were we supposed to do? Ask, I said. She waved her hand. You would have said yes. That's not the point. It is the point, she snapped. You've always been generous. That's who you are. No, that's who they needed me to be. You forged my signature, I said. Her face tightened. Don't use language like that. It's accurate language. She sighed dramatically and sat on my couch, uninvited. You're 34, she said. Still renting, still alone. That money was just sitting there. Claire is building a life. I felt something shift behind my ribs. Not anger. Clarity. That money was my life, I said. You just didn't value it. She stood abruptly. If you go through with this, she said, lowering her voice, you will humiliate your father. You will ruin Claire's wedding. People will talk. I know, I said. She stared at me like she was seeing a stranger. You'd really do that to your own family? I met her gaze. You already did it to me. She left without another word. 2 days later, I received a call from the credit union's fraud department. They had confirmed unauthorized access. They asked if I wanted to proceed. Yes, I said. That same afternoon, my Aunt Marjorie called. My father's sister. The one who never raised her voice. I heard there's some trouble, she said gently. There is. She paused. Your father says you misunderstood. Of course he does. Another pause. Longer. I don't think you did, she said quietly. And I think you should protect yourself. I thanked her and hung up. That night, Claire posted photos of wedding invitations on Facebook. Cream cardstock, gold lettering. Captioned, finally happening. Couldn't have done it without family. I stared at the screen until my eyes burned. That was when my phone rang again. Unknown number, I answered. Ms. Brooks, a woman said, professional and calm. This is Officer Lena Alvarez with the Oregon State Police. We're following up on an identity theft report filed earlier today. My heart didn't race. It settled. Yes, I said. I've been expecting your call. She continued. We'll need to ask you some questions, and we may need to speak with your father. I looked at the invitation photo one last time before closing the app. Yes, I said again. That's fine. After I hung up, I realized something important. They still thought this was a family dispute. They had no idea it was about to become public. And neither did I. Not yet. The first time I realized how far my family was willing to go to protect the lie, it wasn't through shouting or threats. It was through silence. Officer Alvarez scheduled our follow-up interview for Friday morning. She was precise, calm, and methodical. The kind of person who wrote things down exactly as they were said. I liked her immediately. I arrived early, carrying my folder and a copy of the authorization email, printed in black and white. She listened. She asked questions. She never once suggested I was overreacting. When I mentioned the wedding, she paused. Do you know how the funds were used? I have reason to believe they're paying for the venue and deposits, I said. Possibly more. She nodded and made a note. This won't stay contained, she said. Once we verify access points and intent, we'll have to involve financial crimes. I understand. That word had become my anchor. By Friday afternoon, the family narrative shifted. My father sent a group email to every relative I could think of. Cousins I hadn't spoken to in years. Old family friends. Even my former piano teacher was on the list. Subject line. Concern for Natalie. He wrote about stress, about my demanding job, about how I'd misinterpreted a family decision and was now struggling emotionally. He expressed worry for my mental health. He asked for prayers. He did not mention the money. My phone lit up. Are you okay? Your dad's really worried. Maybe you should talk to someone. I didn't reply to a single message. Instead, I forwarded the email to Officer Alvarez. She called me 10 minutes later. Thank you, she said. This helps establish motive and pattern. Pattern. Another word that felt stabilizing. That evening, Claire showed up. Not at my house. At my workplace. I was leaving late, the parking lot mostly empty, when I saw her, leaning against my car, arms crossed, wedding binder tucked under one arm like a shield. You can't keep avoiding us, she said as I approached. I'm not avoiding, I replied. I'm disengaging. She scoffed. You always do this. You go cold instead of talking. I've said everything I need to say. Her eyes darted around the lot, checking for witnesses. Dad is terrified, she said. He says you're trying to destroy him. I unlocked my car, but didn't get in. I'm trying to recover my property, I said. What happens after that is his responsibility." She laughed, sharp and humorless. "You think the police are going to side with you over him? He worked in finance for 30 years. He knows people." "So do I said. She stepped closer. "If you don't drop this," she said, lowering her voice, "you're not coming to the wedding. Mom says you're not welcome." There it was, the punishment they always used. "I wasn't planning to," I said. Her expression faltered, just for a second. "You don't mean that." "I do." She stared at me like she was recalculating everything she thought she knew. "You're really going to choose money over family?" I met her eyes. They already did. I got into my car and drove away while she stood there, binder pressed to her chest, watching the role she'd counted on me to play evaporate. On Monday morning, I got the call. The fraud unit had confirmed unauthorized access from a device registered to my parents' home network. The signature timestamp coincided with a login that did not match my usage patterns. They were escalating. "Your father will be contacted," Daniel Frost told me, "and possibly subpoenaed." That afternoon, my mother called again. This time, she didn't leave a voicemail. She sent a letter, handwritten, delivered by mail. "Dear Natalie, your father hasn't slept in days. He's sick with worry. This has gone too far. We were trying to help your sister start her life, not hurt you. Families make sacrifices. I don't understand why you're being so cruel." Cruel. I folded the letter and placed it in the folder. 2 days later, Aunt Marjorie came over. She knocked softly and waited. "I won't stay long," she said when I opened the door. "I just wanted to see you." We sat at my kitchen table. She didn't lecture. She didn't advise. She just watched me, with an expression I recognize now. Concern without control. "Your father is telling people you're unstable," she said gently. "I know," she nodded. "That's what my ex-husband did when I left him. It's effective." I smiled faintly. "What do you want, Natalie?" she asked. I thought about it. "I want my name back," I said. "My future, and my silence respected." She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "Then keep going." The next day, Officer Alvarez called again. "We've uncovered something else," she said. "A line of credit opened 18 months ago in your name. $42,000. I felt the room tilt. "I didn't open that," I said. "I didn't think you did." The word betrayal suddenly felt too small. By Thursday, the investigation had grown teeth. Warrants were discussed, statements taken. My father stopped calling. Instead, the wedding website went live. Claire and Evan. Forever begins. The date was set for Christmas weekend. I stared at the screen, at the registry, at the smiling engagement photos. And for the first time since this started, I smiled too, because I finally understood something they didn't. They thought this was about stopping me. It was about timing, and I had plenty of it. The day the wedding invitations arrived, I was sitting in a quiet conference room with a lawyer, not my family's lawyer, mine. Her name was Rebecca Sloan. Mid-50s, silver hair cut sharp at the jaw, voice calm in the way that only comes from long familiarity with other people's disasters. She specialized in financial abuse and civil recovery. When Officer Alvarez suggested I speak with her, I didn't hesitate. Rebecca didn't ask me how I felt. She asked me what I wanted. "I want my money returned," I said. "And I want my name cleared." She nodded. "Those are compatible goals." I slid my folder across the table. She flipped through it slowly, pausing at the forged authorization, the access logs, the bank statements, the newly discovered line of credit. "This is clean," she said. Disturbingly so. "What does that mean?" "It means whoever did this wasn't careless. They believed they were entitled." That landed harder than I expected. She continued. "There are 2 paths forward. Criminal prosecution will likely proceed regardless at this point. But we can also file a civil claim to recover damages and freeze assets." "What kind of assets?" "Wedding deposits," she said. "Joint accounts. Potentially property." I thought of Claire's venue. The florist. The caterer. The dress. "Can we do it quietly?" I asked. Rebecca looked at me for a long moment. "We can try," she said, "but your family won't." She was right. That evening, I found a thick envelope taped to my door. My wedding invitation. Cream cardstock. Gold foil. Identical to the one Claire had posted online. My name was handwritten in my mother's careful script, as if nothing had happened. Inside was a separate note. "We want you there. Let's put this behind us." I laughed once, short, almost surprised. I didn't respond. Instead, I forwarded a photo of the invitation to Rebecca with one sentence. "They're still spending." Her reply came 10 minutes later. "Good. That helps us." The next morning, my father called. I let it go to voicemail. "Natalie," his voice said, low and controlled. "You've made your point. This has gone far enough. We can talk like adults. Call me." I didn't. By Friday, Rebecca filed the civil motion. It was precise, targeted. A request for asset preservation pending investigation. No accusations, just facts. That afternoon, the venue received notice. So did the caterer, the florist, the dress boutique. Claire found out when her wedding planner called her during a tasting. She came to my house that night, not alone. My parents were with her. All three stood on my porch like a delegation. My father looked older than I remembered. My mother looked furious. Claire looked terrified. I opened the door, but didn't invite them in. "You did this," Claire said immediately. "They froze everything." "I protected my property," I replied. "You're ruining my wedding." My father stepped forward. "This is extortion," he said. "You're abusing the system." Rebecca's voice echoed in my head. "Let them talk." "You forged my identity," I said calmly. "That's a crime." My mother's eyes flashed. "How dare you speak to your father that way? How dare he steal from me?" Silence followed. Thick. Uncomfortable. Claire broke it. "You've always been jealous," she said. "You hate that I'm happy." I looked at her. Really looked. She was clutching her engagement ring like it might vanish. "This isn't about happiness," I said. "It's about entitlement." My father's jaw tightened. "If you don't drop this," he said, "you will be cut off. Completely." I nodded. That already happened. They left shortly after. No shouting, no tears. Just the sound of their footsteps retreating down the walkway. The next week moved quickly. Subpoenas were issued, statements recorded. The credit line was confirmed fraudulent. My father's retirement account was flagged. And then the call came. Officer Alvarez again. "We're executing a warrant on your parents' home next week," she said. "We believe there are devices containing evidence of identity theft." I closed my eyes. "Do you need anything from me?" "Just to be available," she said. "And to prepare yourself." "For what?" "For the shift," she said. "Right now, they still think this is a family matter." I understood. That night, I received a message from Evan, Claire's fiancé, the only one who hadn't reached out until now. "Can we talk? I think there's something I should know." We met the next afternoon at a coffee shop downtown. He looked exhausted. "I didn't know," he said immediately, "about the money." "I know," I replied. He swallowed. "Claire told me it was a gift, that you insisted." I sipped my coffee. "There's more," he said. "Her parents asked me to sign something last month, about combining finances after the wedding. They said it was standard." My pulse slowed. "What did you sign?" He slid a copy across the table. "A post-nuptial agreement, drafted, unsigned by Claire, naming him as a beneficiary of a family trust, funded by my stolen money." I folded the paper carefully. "Thank you," I said. "For what?" "For telling me, before it mattered." He looked at me with something like regret. "I don't think I'm getting married," he said quietly. I stood, gathering my things. "That," I said, "is your decision." As I walked out, my phone buzzed. "Rebecca, we need to talk." Something just broke open. I smiled as I stepped into the rain, because I could feel it now. The shift Officer Alvarez warned me about. The moment where control changes hands. And this time, it was mine. Rebecca didn't waste time when I arrived at our office. She didn't offer coffee. She didn't sit back in her chair. She closed the door, pulled the blinds halfway, and placed a single document on the table between us. "This came in an hour ago," she said, "from the state investigator assigned to your case." I looked down. A preliminary asset tracing report. My name appeared in places I didn't expect. Accounts I'd never opened. Transfers I'd never authorized. A shell LLC formed 2 years earlier, using my social security number and my old college address. The company name was bland, forgettable, designed not to raise alarms. Brooks Family Consulting, LLC. I felt a slow chill move through my body. "They used you," Rebecca said evenly, "as a financial buffer, Credit lines, liquidity, risk absorption. How much? I asked. She didn't soften it. North of 400,000. I leaned back, staring at the ceiling. So the wedding wasn't the beginning. It was the cover, Rebecca continued. Your father didn't just steal from you once. He's been leveraging your identity to stabilize their finances, your sister's lifestyle, their retirement. And no one noticed. Someone noticed, she said. They just assumed you approved. That sentence landed with surgical precision. I thought about all the times I'd been praised for being responsible, for being easy, for never making a fuss. This was the dividend. What happens now? I asked. Now, she said, the case stops being emotional and starts being dangerous for them. The warrant was executed the following Tuesday. I didn't go. Officer Alvarez told me later what they found. 3 laptops, 2 external hard drives, a folder labeled Natalie, tucked into a filing cabinet behind old tax returns. Passwords written on yellow legal pads in my mother's handwriting. My father was cooperative, polite, shocked even. My daughter wouldn't want this, he said, according to the report. There must be some mistake. There wasn't. By Wednesday, my parents' accounts were frozen. By Thursday, their attorney requested a meeting. Rebecca attended. I did not. They're still framing this as a misunderstanding, she told me afterward. But they're scared. Good, I said. Claire called that night. I almost didn't answer. Almost. What did you do? She demanded. I told the truth, I said. You destroyed our parents. No, I replied. I stopped letting them use me. She was quiet for a moment. Evan left, she said. He called off the wedding. I closed my eyes, not out of relief, but finality. I know. You talked to him? He talked to me. Her voice cracked. Just slightly. You always do this, she said. You make yourself look innocent, and everyone else look evil. I let the silence stretch. Claire, I said finally, if the truth makes someone look bad, that's not manipulation. She hung up on me. The fallout accelerated after that. The wedding website went dark. Deposits were forfeited. Vendors backed out quietly, citing legal concerns. Friends stopped asking questions and started avoiding calls. And then the letter arrived. Certified mail. From my parents' attorney. It was formal, polished, carefully worded. They were willing to return a portion of the funds in exchange for dropping the civil suit and cooperating to resolve the matter privately. No admission of wrongdoing. No acknowledgement of identity theft. Rebecca read it once and slid it back to me. They're testing you, she said, seeing if guilt still works. I thought about my mother's letter, about my father's voicemail, about Claire standing in my workplace parking lot, threatening exclusion like it was leverage. No, I said. Rebecca smiled, small and approving. Good, she said, because the DA just upgraded the charges. Financial fraud, identity theft, conspiracy. My father's name was no longer followed by retired. It was followed by defendant. That night, I sat alone in my townhouse and opened my banking app again. Not the old one. The new account Rebecca insisted I open. My name only. No shared access. No legacy permissions. The balance was modest. It didn't matter. What mattered was the quiet. No calls. No messages. No demands. Just space. For the first time in my adult life, no one was reaching into my future without asking. I poured a glass of wine and stood by the window, watching the lights of the city blink on one by one. I wasn't celebrating. I was bracing, because I knew something else was coming. Families like mine didn't give up control easily. And the closer we got to Christmas, the more desperate they were going to become. Christmas decorations went up around the city the same week my father was formally charged. Wreaths appeared on doors. Lights wrapped themselves around bare trees. Holiday music floated through grocery store aisles like nothing was wrong. Like families everywhere weren't quietly splitting along fault lines no one wanted to name. I stopped going home early in the evenings. Not because I was afraid, but because I needed distance from the quiet. Silence can be clarifying, but too much of it invites memory. On December 3rd, Rebecca called me, just after sunset. They're asking for mediation, she said. I didn't answer right away. Mediation for what? I asked finally. To negotiate restitution and sentencing recommendations. Your parents want to present a united front before the arraignment. And Claire, she's not named in the criminal charges, Rebecca said carefully, but she's implicated in the civil case. Beneficiary of stolen funds. I pictured my sister in her childhood bedroom, surrounded by wedding magazines she no longer needed, rewriting the story in her head until she was the victim again. What do you recommend? I asked. Rebecca didn't hesitate. You don't owe them privacy, she said, but you do owe yourself closure. Mediation lets you speak once, clearly, on the record. I agreed. The mediation was scheduled for the following Friday, in a neutral office downtown. I arrived 10 minutes early. Rebecca arrived 5 minutes later. We sat across from an empty table while a mediator shuffled papers and avoided eye contact. My parents came in together. They looked smaller than I remembered. My father's shoulders were rounded, his suit slightly rumpled. My mother's lipstick was carefully applied, her posture rigid with contained fury. Claire arrived last, alone, eyes red, jaw tight. No one hugged me. Good. The mediator explained the rules. Neutral language, no interruptions, no personal attacks. My father spoke first. Natalie, he said, folding his hands. We never intended for things to go this far. I waited. Everything we did, he continued, was for the family, to protect what we built. With my name, I said calmly. He winced. My mother shot me a look. We assumed consent, my father said. You never objected before. I was never informed, I replied. Claire scoffed under her breath. The mediator glanced at her, but said nothing. Rebecca leaned forward slightly. Assumption is not authorization. My father nodded, as if conceding a minor technicality. We're prepared to return the remaining funds, he said. In installments. Remaining, I repeated. Yes, my mother cut in sharply. The wedding deposits are gone, non-refundable. We can't undo that. I turned to Claire. Did you know where the money came from? I asked. She hesitated. Just long enough. I trusted our parents, she said. They said it was handled. That was her answer. Rebecca slid a document across the table. This outlines full restitution, she said, including the fraudulent credit line, legal fees, and damages. My father stared at the number and went pale. That's impossible, he said. We don't have that kind of liquidity. You did, Rebecca replied. You just spent it. My mother's composure cracked. You're punishing us, she said, voice trembling. Over money. I met her eyes. No, I said. I'm correcting a theft. Silence followed. Heavy. Unavoidable. The mediator cleared his throat. Ms. Brooks, he said to me, what outcome are you seeking? I'd rehearsed this answer, but I didn't need the script. I want my identity restored, I said. My credit cleared. Full restitution through asset liquidation, if necessary. And I want no further contact outside of legal channels. Claire stared at me like I'd slapped her. You'd cut us off completely? She asked. I already have, I said. The session ended shortly after. No agreement reached. No hands shaken. As we stood to leave, my father spoke again. You'll regret this, he said quietly, when we're gone. I paused at the door. I regret trusting you, I said, not holding you accountable. Outside, the air was sharp and cold. Rebecca exhaled slowly. That went about as expected, she said. Is that good or bad? I asked. It's clean, she said, which is good. The arraignment happened the week before Christmas. I didn't attend. Rebecca texted me afterward. Your father pled not guilty. Trial date set for February. Bail granted with conditions. Conditions included no access to financial accounts, no contact with me, and mandatory financial counseling. My mother didn't call. Claire sent one email. You've ruined Christmas. I deleted it without reading past the subject line. On Christmas morning, I woke up alone in my townhouse. No tree, no presents, no forced cheer. I made coffee and sat by the window, watching snow dust the street. At 9:12 a.m., there was a knock at the door. I didn't expect anyone. When I opened it, Aunt Marjorie stood there holding a small box wrapped in plain brown paper. I hope this is okay, she said. I didn't know where else to go. I stepped aside and let her in. We sat at the kitchen table. She didn't ask about the case. She didn't ask how I was feeling. She handed me the box. Your grandmother gave this to me years ago, she said. She told me to give it to you if things ever went the way I feared. Inside was a thin leather folder. Old, worn. Documents. letters, a handwritten note. It explained everything. My grandmother had left money in trust for me. Modest, but meaningful. My father had been named executor. He never told me. He redirected it, slowly, quietly, into family accounts, into Claire's education, into the illusion that everything we had was earned. The betrayal wasn't new. It was inherited. Aunt Marjorie watched my face carefully. "I'm so sorry," she said. I nodded. "I'm not surprised," I replied. That afternoon, I called Rebecca. "There's more," I said, "and it goes back decades." She was quiet for a moment. "Then we adjust," she said. "And Natalie?" "Yes, you did the right thing." I hung up and sat alone again, holding the folder on my lap. Outside, children laughed somewhere down the street. A dog barked. Life went on. And for the first time, I felt something close to peace. Not because it was over, but because I finally understood the truth. This wasn't a single betrayal, it was a system. And I was the first one who refused to carry it forward. January stripped everything bare. The holidays passed without incident, which in my family was never a good sign. Silence meant strategy. It meant conversations I wasn't part of, decisions being framed as necessities, blame being carefully redistributed so no one had to sit with it too long. Rebecca called me the first Monday after New Year's. "We need to amend the civil complaint," she said. "The trust information changes the scope." "How?" I asked. "It establishes a pattern of long-term financial misappropriation," she replied, "and fiduciary abuse. Your father wasn't just a joint account holder. He was an executor." That word landed heavily. Executor. A role that came with legal obligation and legal consequences. The amended filing went out that afternoon. Expanded timeline, expanded damages, expanded exposure. 2 days later, my mother broke her silence. She didn't call. She showed up at my office. I was coming out of an operations review when the receptionist waved me over, eyes wide. "There's a woman here asking for you," she whispered. "She says she's your mother." I considered saying no. Truly. But something told me this was a moment that needed to be observed, not avoided. We met in the lobby. Public, bright, no privacy to weaponize. She looked thinner, older. The controlled elegance she'd always worn like armor had slipped. "This is humiliating," she said without greeting. "People are watching." "I know," I said. She gestured around us. "Your coworkers, your boss. Do you have any idea what this looks like?" "I do," I replied. "It looks like accountability." Her eyes flashed. "You always were dramatic, and you always minimized," I said calmly. She leaned in, lowering her voice. "Your father could go to prison." "He could," I agreed. "And you're okay with that?" I thought of the trust, the years, the quiet theft, dressed up as family obligation. "I'm okay with the truth," I said. Her face tightened. "You're not the only one who suffered." I never said I was. She stared at me for a long moment, searching for the version of me that used to fold. She didn't find her. "I raised you," she said finally. "And I outgrew you," I replied. She left without another word. That afternoon, my boss called me into her office. Janet closed the door and gestured for me to sit. "I want you to hear this from me directly," she said. "Your work here is solid. None of what's happening outside this building changes that." "Thank you," I said. She nodded. "If you need time for court, mediation, or just space, take it. We've got you." Support doesn't always come from where you expect it. Sometimes it comes quietly, without conditions. The trial date was set for late February. In the meantime, the pressure escalated. A cousin I barely knew sent me a long email about forgiveness. A former family friend called to tell me my father wasn't himself lately. An old neighbor left a voicemail asking me to think about my mother's health. I saved everything, forwarded it to Rebecca. "Documented influence attempts," she said. "Helpful." Claire tried one last time. She emailed me from a new address. Subject: "Please." The body was short. "I can't sleep. Dad's spiraling. Mom won't leave the house. I know things went wrong, but do you really want this on your conscience?" I stared at the message for a long time before typing back. "I didn't cause this. I revealed it. Please don't contact me again." She didn't respond. Mid-January, Evan reached out. Not to me, to Rebecca. He had retained his own attorney. The post-nuptial draft my parents had pushed him to sign had raised red flags with his firm. They wanted to cooperate with the investigation to ensure no future liability. Rebecca relayed the message without commentary. "They're unraveling," she said. "When allies start defecting, it accelerates." I didn't feel victorious. I felt tired. That night, I went through the leather folder again. My grandmother's handwriting was neat, deliberate. She'd seen it, all of it. And she'd tried, in her way, to leave me a lifeline. I wondered how many times she'd been told to keep the peace. The arraignment transcripts arrived the following week. Reading my father's words on the page was surreal. The same man who used to lecture me about responsibility, now pleading confusion, misunderstanding, family complexity. The judge was not impressed. Discovery began in earnest. Emails, bank logs, device histories. One email stood out. Sent from my father to my mother years earlier. "Natalie doesn't ask questions. She trusts us. As long as we're careful, this works." I stared at the sentence until the words blurred. That was the moment something hardened inside me. Not anger. Resolution. By early February, the DA offered a plea framework. Reduced sentencing in exchange for full cooperation, restitution, and acknowledgement of wrongdoing. My father refused. "He believes he can still control the narrative," Rebecca said. "Then he's miscalculated," I replied. The night before depositions began, I couldn't sleep. I sat on my couch, lights off, city glowing faintly through the windows. I thought about the younger version of me, the one who said yes automatically, the one who equated love with compliance. She wouldn't recognize me now. And that was the point. Because whatever happened next, whatever the outcome, this part was already over. They no longer decided who I was. And they were about to learn what happens when the person you underestimated stops protecting you. Depositions began on a gray Tuesday morning, the kind where the sky feels low and unmovable. I arrived early, not because I was anxious, but because I wanted to see the room empty. I wanted to understand the space before my family filled it with their version of events. Rebecca sat beside me, calm, organized, unreadable. A court reporter adjusted her equipment. The opposing counsel shuffled papers with performative confidence. My parents entered together. They didn't look at me. Claire came last. She sat 2 chairs away, arms wrapped around herself, eyes fixed on the table. She looked smaller than I'd ever seen her, stripped of the attention that usually buffered her from consequence. The oath was administered. The record began. My father testified first. He spoke the way he always had, carefully, authoritatively, as if tone alone could still control the outcome. He described me as independent, capable, financially savvy. He emphasized how close we were, how much I trusted him. Rebecca let him talk. Then she began. "Mr. Brooks," she said evenly, "were you aware that you were legally obligated, as executor, to preserve trust assets solely for the beneficiary?" "Yes," he said. "And did you ever disclose the existence of that trust to Ms. Brooks?" He hesitated. Just a beat too long. "I don't recall." Rebecca nodded, as if she expected that answer. "Do you recall transferring funds from the trust into joint family accounts?" He shifted in his chair. "I managed funds holistically," he said, "for the good of the family." "For your daughter Claire's expenses," Rebecca clarified. "Yes, without Ms. Brooks' knowledge." He didn't answer. Rebecca slid a document across the table. "Is this your email?" He looked down, swallowed. "Yes. Please read the highlighted sentence aloud." The room went quiet. "Natalie doesn't ask questions," he read. "She trusts us. As long as we're careful, this works." I watched his face as the words left his mouth. Watched something collapse behind his eyes. The record captured everything. My mother testified next. She spoke about stress, about fear, about wanting to keep the family intact. She cried once, quietly, dabbing at her eyes with the tissue she'd brought prepared. Rebecca waited until the tears subsided. "Mrs. Brooks," she said, "were you aware your husband used your daughter's identity to open lines of credit?" My mother hesitated. "Yes," she said finally. "And did you object?" "No." "Why not?" "Because," my mother said, voice breaking, "Natalie always lands on her feet." There it was. Not love. Assumption. Claire's deposition was last. She was defensive at first, claimed ignorance, claimed trust, claimed confusion. Then Rebecca showed her the transfers, the wedding deposits, the apartment lease she'd signed 6 months earlier, using funds from an account tied to my name. Claire's voice dropped. I didn't ask where it came from, she said. Why? Rebecca asked. Claire shrugged weakly. I didn't want to know. That answer stayed with me. Not wanting to know is a choice. The depositions ended just before sunset. Outside the building, reporters had gathered. Not many, just enough. Someone called my name. I didn't stop. Rebecca did. No statements today, she said calmly. The facts are in the record. That night, the story broke local. Former financial advisor charged in family fraud case. They didn't use my name. They didn't need to. The calls came anyway. Old friends, distant relatives, people I hadn't heard from in years suddenly remembering my existence. I let everything go to voicemail. The next day, Rebecca called with an update. The DA is revising the offer, she said. Stronger evidence changes leverage. And my father? He's rattled, she said. Your mother is urging him to settle. And Claire, Rebecca paused. She's asked for separate counsel. I closed my eyes. That was the sound of the last illusion breaking. A week later, the plea deal was accepted. My father stood in court and admitted to misappropriation, identity theft, and breach of fiduciary duty. The words were clinical, flat, nothing like the speeches he used to give at Thanksgiving. He received probation, community service, mandatory restitution, no jail time. Some people expected me to be disappointed. I wasn't. Justice isn't always loud. Sometimes it's structural. The restitution order was clear. Assets liquidated. Accounts closed. Funds returned in stages. 3 weeks later, the first transfer hit my new account, $198,400. I stared at the number for a long time, not because it made me happy, because it felt final. Claire moved out of state shortly after. No forwarding address. No goodbye. My mother stopped contacting me entirely. My father sent one letter, handwritten, apologetic in tone, but careful with responsibility. I didn't respond. In late March, Rebecca called me one last time. The case is closed, she said. Civil and criminal. You're free. Free. That word felt strange, heavy, earned. That evening, I walked through a neighborhood I'd been eyeing for months. Tree-lined streets, modest homes, porches with lights on. I stopped in front of one and imagined myself inside. Not as a favor. Not as a compromise. As a choice. I pulled out my phone and texted my lender. I'm ready to move forward. As I walked home, I realized something. The climax everyone expected had already passed. There was no confrontation, no screaming, no dramatic exit. Just documents, decisions, consequences. And in that quiet aftermath, something better than revenge settled in. Ownership of my name, my future, my silence. And for the first time, the story wasn't about what they took. It was about what I was finally keeping. The house I bought wasn't the one I originally imagined. It didn't have a wraparound porch or a dramatic entryway. It was a modest 2-story in a quiet neighborhood south of the city, the kind of place people overlooked because it didn't perform success loudly. That suited me. I closed in early April, on a Wednesday morning that felt deliberately ordinary. No one came with me. No family, no celebration. Just paperwork, keys, and the soft finality of a pen sliding across paper. The escrow officer smiled when she handed me the keys. Congratulations, she said. You're officially a homeowner. I thanked her and stepped outside into the pale spring sunlight. I sat in my car for a moment, keys heavy in my palm, and felt something loosen in my chest. Not joy exactly. Permission. I moved in slowly, one room at a time. No rush, no pressure to perform a life for anyone else. The first thing I hung was a single framed photo of my grandmother. Not because she'd saved me, but because she'd tried. The second thing I did was change every lock. Work continued as normal, which I appreciated more than I expected. Stability had a different texture now. It wasn't something I owed anyone. It was something I chose. Then the call came. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. This is Judge William Harper, a voice said. Calm, older, direct. I presided over your father's case. I straightened instinctively. Yes, Your Honor. "I'm calling because your grandmother's trust came across my desk during sentencing," he said. "There was an irregularity that concerns me." My stomach tightened. "It appears your father dissolved the trust without proper authorization," he continued. "That is separate from the charges already adjudicated." "What does that mean?" I asked. "It means," he said, "there may be remaining assets." The next week was a blur of meetings. A forensic accountant, a probate specialist, Rebecca, back in the picture, calm as ever. The trust had been larger than anyone knew. Investments, a small piece of commercial property, funds that had never been disclosed. My father hadn't stolen it all, just enough to feel entitled. By May, the court ordered the trust reconstituted, assets liquidated properly, remaining funds transferred to me as the sole beneficiary. The final amount was just under $320,000. When the transfer cleared, I didn't tell anyone. I didn't need to. Around that time, Claire reappeared. She sent a message through a mutual acquaintance. She wants to apologize. She's struggling. Can you talk to her? I declined. Not out of anger, out of clarity. Some conversations are not about resolution. They're about reopening doors you worked hard to close. My mother tried once more. A card arrived in the mail. No return address. Inside was a single sentence. "I hope you're happy." I recycled it. In June, my company announced a restructuring. My role expanded. My compensation adjusted accordingly. No fanfare, just acknowledgement. I accepted it without guilt. That summer, I started gardening. Tomatoes, basil, rosemary, small practical things that required patience and consistency. No drama, no shortcuts. On the 4th of July, I sat on my back steps and watched fireworks bloom faintly over the rooftops. I thought about all the holidays I'd spent managing emotions that weren't mine, making myself smaller so everyone else could stay comfortable. I didn't miss it. In August, I ran into Evan by chance at a bookstore downtown. He looked different, lighter. We exchanged polite conversation. Nothing heavy. "I'm glad you're doing well," he said sincerely. "So am I," I replied. He hesitated. "You were right," he said. "About a lot of things." I nodded. That was enough. As summer faded into fall, the story stopped circulating. New scandals replaced it. New narratives took its place. That's how it always goes. But something else had shifted. People treated me differently, with more care, more respect. Not because they knew what happened, but because I carried myself differently. Boundaries have a way of doing that. In September, I received confirmation that the last restitution payment had cleared. The ledger was balanced. That night, I sat in my living room, lights low, and thought about the word revenge. This hadn't been revenge. It had been restoration. Revenge is loud. Restitution is quiet. One is about punishment. The other is about return. And what returned to me wasn't just money. It was authorship. I was no longer reacting to my family's decisions. I was writing my own. And the final chapter was still unwritten. But for the first time, I wasn't afraid of that. I was ready. The first invitation arrived in October. It wasn't from my parents, or Claire, or anyone connected to what I now thought of as my former life. It was from a woman named Diane Keller, chair of the nonprofit board my company partnered with for regional logistics training. She'd been polite but distant for years, the kind of professional contact that never crossed into familiarity. Her email was brief. "I heard about what you handled this year, quietly and with integrity. I'd like to talk." We met for lunch near the river. She didn't mention my family. She didn't ask questions framed as concern. She talked about governance, about oversight, about how organizations fail when trust goes unchecked. "You understand systems," she said, studying me over her coffee. "And you understand what happens when people abuse them." I did. She offered me a board seat. Unpaid, visible, accountable. I accepted. Not because it looked good, because it felt right. That same week, my mother's name appeared on my phone again. Blocked. I stared at it for a long time before letting it ring out. There was a time when that would have undone me, when silence felt like punishment. Now it felt like maintenance. In November, I hosted Thanksgiving for the first time. Not a production, not a performance. Just a table for three. Aunt Marjorie, a coworker who couldn't travel, and me. We cooked together, laughed about nothing important, ate too much pie. At one point, Aunt Marjorie looked around my dining room, warm light reflecting off walls that were finally mine. "You broke a pattern," she said quietly. "I finished it," I replied. She smiled. In December, a letter arrived from the probation office. Routine notice. Compliance confirmed. Case formally closed. I placed it in a drawer and didn't think about it again. Christmas came and went without ceremony. No tree, no tension. Just quiet mornings and long walks through frost-dusted streets. I didn't feel lonely. I felt intact. In January, Claire tried one last time. A letter, longer than the others. Apologetic in tone, careful in language. She wrote about therapy, about confusion, about not knowing who she was without our parents' scaffolding. She asked if we could meet. Just once. I read it twice. Then I folded it, placed it back in the envelope, and filed it away. Not answered. Not returned. Some apologies are requests in disguise. In February, exactly 1 year after my savings disappeared, I stood in my kitchen making coffee when I realized something startling. I hadn't thought about them in days. Not with anger, not with curiosity, not even with sadness. They had become background noise. That was the real shift. The absence of reaction. Later that month, I was promoted. No announcement, no ceremony, just a quiet conversation with my supervisor and a revised contract. As I signed it, I thought about how different this signature felt from the one forged in my name. This one was deliberate, chosen. In March, I planted my garden again. The soil was darker this year, richer, easier to work. I knelt there with dirt under my nails and felt grounded in a way I never had before. Control isn't about dominance, it's about consent. I had it now. Everywhere it mattered. That evening, as the sun dipped low, my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "This is your father. I know you blocked me. I just want you to know I understand now." I stared at the screen. Then I deleted it. Understanding doesn't require access. As spring returned, so did something else. Confidence. Not the loud kind, the quiet kind that doesn't need witnesses. I wasn't proving anything anymore. I was living it. And that, I realized, was the final consequence they never anticipated. They lost control. And I lost nothing worth keeping. The first sign that the past wasn't finished with me came quietly, the way most real trouble does. It arrived as a certified letter from a law firm in Salem I didn't recognize. I opened it at my kitchen counter, the envelope already creased from being carried back and forth all day without my noticing. The letterhead was formal, conservative, the kind designed to imply authority before a single word was read. It was a notice of intent. My parents were contesting the reconstitution of my grandmother's trust, not on legal grounds, on moral ones. They claimed undue influence, emotional coercion, estrangement-driven retaliation. According to the letter, my actions had pressured an elderly family member in her final years and fractured the family unit to secure personal gain. I read it twice. Then a third time, slowly, appreciating the precision of the manipulation. They weren't denying the facts anymore. They were reframing them. I called Rebecca. She exhaled when I finished reading. "I expected this," she said. "It's a last move, not a strong one." "Does it have teeth?" I asked. "Not legally," she said. "But it could drag, delay, create noise." Noise. That was always their weapon. Exhaustion. Confusion, making things so unpleasant that I'd eventually concede just to make it stop. "I won't," I said. "I know," Rebecca replied, "but there's something else." She paused. "They're asking the court to mandate family mediation as part of the probate dispute." I closed my eyes. "No," I said, "absolutely not. We can challenge it," she said, "but the judge may want to hear testimony about intent." Intent. That word again. The hearing was scheduled for late April. I spent the weeks leading up to it the same way I'd spent the last year. Working, sleeping, living, refusing to spiral. But something had changed. This wasn't about money anymore. This was about narrative. They wanted to be seen as victims of a cold, ungrateful daughter who had gone too far. And this time, I would speak. The courtroom was smaller than I expected. Less formal, more intimate. The kind of space where words lingered longer than intended. My parents sat together on the opposite side. They looked fragile. Carefully so. My father avoided my eyes. My mother held a tissue she didn't use. When it was my turn, I stood. No notes, no script, just truth. My grandmother created a trust for me because she knew something I didn't yet, I said. That love without boundaries becomes control, that silence becomes permission. She tried to protect me. The trust was that protection. I looked at my parents. They dismantled it, I continued, quietly, over years, not out of necessity, out of entitlement. The judge listened without interruption. I didn't destroy my family, I said. I stopped financing their version of it. My mother wept softly. The judge nodded once, thoughtfully. The ruling came 2 weeks later. The challenge was denied. The trust stood. My parents were ordered to cease further claims and absorb legal costs for frivolous filing. It was over. For real this time. On the drive home, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt finished. In May, I hosted a small dinner in my backyard. Nothing formal. Just a few people who knew me as I was now, not as I'd been trained to be. Someone asked me once if I missed my family. I thought about it. I miss who I thought they were, I said, not who they chose to be. That summer, I took my first real vacation. Just me. A quiet rental on the coast. Mornings with coffee and fog. Evenings with books I read slowly. No emergencies. No guilt. One afternoon, walking along the beach, I realized something that stopped me in my tracks. I trusted myself completely. Not as the responsible one. Not as the fixer. But as the authority in my own life. That was a real inheritance. And no one could take it from me. Only one chapter remained, not of conflict, but of meaning. And I was ready to close it on my own terms. I used to think closure was something someone else gave you. An apology, an admission. A moment where the other person finally understood the damage they caused and named it out loud. I waited for that moment longer than I care to admit. Not because I needed validation, but because I was trained to believe resolution required consensus. I was wrong. Closure is a decision. I understood that on an ordinary Tuesday morning in early October, nearly 2 years after the night my account hit zero, I was standing in my kitchen, barefoot, sunlight cutting across the counter, scrolling through emails before work. Nothing urgent, nothing dramatic, just life continuing. There was a message from Rebecca confirming that all files related to my case had been formally archived. No further actions pending. No loose ends. I closed my laptop and stood there for a moment, listening to the quiet hum of the house. This was it. No more hearings. No more letters. No more waiting for the next shoe to drop. The story was complete. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel vindicated. I felt calm. That calm was hard-earned. Over the past year, people had asked me variations of the same question. Was it worth it? The stress, the fallout, the permanent rupture. They always asked it gently, as if they were afraid of the answer. I never responded immediately, not because I didn't know, but because the question itself was flawed. They were measuring worth in terms of comfort. I was measuring it in terms of dignity. What I lost was an illusion, a carefully maintained fiction where love was conditional and loyalty flowed in one direction. What I gained was something quieter and infinitely more stable. Ownership of my time, my money, my future, my silence. I didn't reconcile with my parents. I didn't rebuild anything with my sister. I didn't stage a dramatic final conversation where everyone cried and promised to do better. That version of healing belongs in movies. Real healing is less cinematic. It's waking up and realizing your body no longer tenses when your phone rings. It's making decisions without running them through someone else's expectations first. It's choosing peace, even when it costs you people who benefited from your chaos. In November, I hosted Thanksgiving again. Same small table, same quiet joy. This time, a neighbor joined us, then another. People who knew nothing about my past and didn't need to. We talked about books, travel, weather, ordinary things that felt extraordinary because they weren't weighted with obligation. After dinner, I stepped outside alone. The air was cold and clean. Leaves crunched under my feet. I looked back at the warm glow coming from my windows and felt something settle deep in my chest. Safety. Not the kind someone promises you, the kind you build. In December, I received one final message from my mother. It wasn't angry. It wasn't manipulative. It was tired. I didn't respond, not because I hated her, because responding would have reopened a door I'd already closed with intention. Boundaries aren't walls meant to punish others. They're fences meant to protect what grows inside. By the time the new year arrived, my life no longer revolved around what had happened. It informed me, yes. It sharpened my instincts. It made me deliberate where I'd once been automatic. But it didn't define me. I was no longer the family's backup plan, their safety net, their unspoken solution. I was simply a woman living a life she chose. Looking back, I can see the moment everything changed. It wasn't when the money disappeared. It wasn't when the police got involved. It wasn't even when the truth came out in a courtroom. It was the first time I said no and didn't explain myself afterward. That was the real rebellion. If you're listening to this and something feels familiar, I want to be clear about one thing. You don't need to be louder. You don't need to justify your choices to people who benefit from your silence. You don't need to sacrifice your future to preserve someone else's comfort. Love that requires self-erasure isn't love. It's control. And choosing yourself isn't betrayal. It's survival. I didn't get revenge. I got my life back. And that, I've learned, is the kind of ending no one can take from you. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever been the responsible one, the reliable one, the person everyone leaned on until you started to break, you're not alone. Share your thoughts in the comments. I read every one. And if you want to hear more stories like this, stories about boundaries, karma, and the quiet power of choosing yourself, take a moment to like and subscribe. Until next time, protect your peace.